Welcome back, everyone. Today we're diving into something pretty fascinating, the world of wishes.
Ooh, wishes. Always a fun topic.
Yeah, but we're not talking about the birthday cake kind of wishes.
Okay, going deeper. I like it.
We're talking about the difference between, like those fleeting wishes and those desires that are like really fueled by hope, the kind that can actually shape our lives.
That's a powerful distinction. And I think it's something we all grapple with. Like, how do we move from just wishing for things to actually having those hopeful desires that lead to real change?
And to help us unpack this, we're turning to, well, would you believe it, a text that tackles this contrast from a biblical perspective.
Yeah.
Get ready for some, well, I think some surprising insights and maybe even a challenge to look at our own wishes.
I'm intrigued already. I always find that looking at these concepts through a biblical lens adds a whole new layer of depth.
So let's get right to it. What makes a wish idle versus hopeful, according to this text we've got?
Well, the text really zeroes in on action, or should I say the lack of it. An idle wish, it's like a daydream. It's passive longing with zero intention to actually make it happen.
So it's that classic, I wish I won the lottery, but never buying a ticket situation.
Bingo. Or like wishing you were in better shape but never hitting the gym.
Ouch, that one hits close to home.
Right. But the text doesn't just stop at defining idle wishes. It digs into what the Bible has to say about this kind of thinking. And, there are some pretty strong warnings.
Oh, really? Like what?
Well, it brings up Proverbs 13.4, the one about the sluggard who desires and desires but gets absolutely nowhere. The text argues that it's because they lack the discipline to actually do something. They're stuck in this cycle of wanting but not doing, and that leads to, well, emptiness.
So it's not just about being lazy, it's about the effect that kind of thinking has on us. Like it's actually harmful to our well-being.
That's what the text suggests, yeah. And it makes sense, right? If we're constantly wishing for things but never taking steps to achieve them, it's going to lead to frustration, disappointment, maybe even a sense of hopelessness.
It's like that saying, a goal without a plan is just a wish. We can wish all day long, but without action, those wishes just kind of, I don't know, evaporate.
They sure do. Now, on the flip side, hopeful desires, they're grounded in possibility. There's this belief that what you want is actually achievable. And it's paired with, well, a willingness to put in the work.
So it's not just blind optimism, it's more about, I don't know, informed hope. Like you believe it's possible and you're ready to take action to make it happen.
Exactly. And this reminds me of something from the New Testament, James 2.17, where it says that faith without works is dead.
Ooh, good connection.
Yeah.
So just like faith needs action to come alive, our wishes need that oomph of effort to become more than just wishes. But how do we actually make that shift? How do we go from these idle wishes to actually cultivating hopeful desires?
Well, the text dives into that too, and it all boils down to one key idea: active hope. It brings up Romans 8.24:25, which talks about hope as something we wait for with patience. But it's not a passive waiting, it's about engaging in the process, believing that what we're hoping for is actually possible.
I'm starting to see how this applies to my own life. I've been wanting to learn to play the guitar for ages, but I just keep putting it off. It's like, I wish I could play, but I never actually do anything about it.
So you're saying your guitar is gathering dust, more of a decoration than an instrument?
Pretty much. But listening to you, I realize it's not enough to just wish for it. I have to actually, pick up the guitar and practice.
There you go. That's the shift from idle wish to hopeful desire. Now, what's interesting is that the text doesn't just leave us with these concepts. It actually uses some pretty compelling biblical examples to drive the point home.
Ooh, I love a good parable. Which ones does it highlight?
Well, one that really stood out to me was the comparison of wishing to be a star, like a famous celebrity, versus wishing to become one. It highlights this tiny but powerful shift in mindset. One is completely passive, the other implies a journey.
That's such a good point. It's easy to get caught up in the fantasy of simply wishing for something without actually considering what it takes to achieve it. What other examples does it offer?
Well, it dives into the parable of the talents in Matthew 25, the one with the servants and the money.
Oh, yeah. It's been a while since I've read that one. How does it connect to this idea of idle wishes versus hopeful desires?
Well, it beautifully illustrates the difference between the servants who invested their talents wisely, embodying that hopeful, diligent spirit, and the one who, well, basically buried his talent out of fear. The text argues that's a form of idle wishing.
It's like he was so afraid of failing, he didn't even try.
Exactly. And the parable seems to be encouraging us to recognize and invest our own talents, whatever they may be, to take risks risks and strive for growth.
What a powerful message. I'm already starting to see how this applies to so many areas of life. What other examples does the text explore?
Well, there's a story of Nehemiah who didn't just wish for the walls of Jerusalem to be rebuilt, you know?
He was a doer.
He was. He prayed, he planned, and he took action. He even went so far as to persuade the king to support his mission.
He saw a need, and he was determined to fix it. He didn't just sit around wishing for a miracle.
Exactly. He really highlights how important it is to combine faith with action, a key element of turning a wish into a hopeful desire.
Wow, this is really resonating with me.
hmm
And I love how these concepts apply not just to these big, grand ambitions, but also to those everyday wishes that we all have. So what's next in this deep dive into wishes?
We've been talking about the difference between those idle wishes that just kind of float around in our heads and those hopeful desires, the ones that are fueled by action and a belief in possibility. We've seen how biblical figures like those servants in the parable of the talents and Nehemiah, they really exemplify that spirit of turning wishes into reality.
Those stories are so inspiring. They show us that taking concrete steps can really make all the difference. It's not enough to just sit around and wish for things to happen. We have to actually put in the effort.
Absolutely. But now, let's shift gears a bit and talk about how our wishes align with, well, with something even bigger, God's will.
Okay, now this is where it gets really interesting for me. Because sometimes, honestly, my wishes feel pretty personal. Like, what does God have to do with my desire to, say, learn to knit or finally take that trip to Italy?
I hear you. And the text acknowledges that our wishes, those personal desires we have, they're not necessarily bad or unimportant. But it reminds us that, as Christians, our desires should ultimately harmonize with God's plan for our lives.
So it's not about giving up on our dreams or passions. It's more about seeing how they fit into like a bigger picture, right?
Exactly. It's about finding that sweet spot where our aspirations and God's purpose for us, where they kind of intersect.
I see. So how do we even begin to figure that out? How can we tell if our wishes are lining up with God's will?
Well, the text offers some really helpful guidance here. First, it emphasizes the importance of delighting in the Lord. Remember Psalm 37.4? It says that when we find our joy in God, He'll grant us the desires of our hearts.
Okay, but what does it actually mean to delight in the Lord? It sounds so, I don't know, abstract.
It's about cultivating a deep and genuine love for God. Finding joy in His presence and wanting to know Him more. It's about spending time in prayer, studying His Word, and making choices that align with, well, with His values.
So it's not just about following rules, but it's about this genuine transformation of the heart, which then leads to different desires. That makes sense.
But what about those times when our wishes, they seem to clash with what we think God might want? What does the text say about that?
Those are the times when prayer becomes so crucial.
Ah, yes, the direct line. But is it really just about asking for what we want? Not quite. James 4.3 warns against asking amiss, which means seeking things just to satisfy our own selfish desires. So prayer isn't about dictating to God what we want, but surrendering our desires to Him and seeking His guidance.
So it's a two-way conversation, a way to understand if our wishes are coming from a place of, as James puts it, lusts, or from a genuine desire to honor God.
Exactly. It's a space to be honest with God about our desires, but also to be open to His redirection. Sometimes that might mean letting go of a wish that's not in line with His plan, trusting that He has something even better in store.
I can see how that would lead to greater trust and peace, even though it might be tough to let go of some of those wishes.
Absolutely. And remember, this whole process of aligning our wishes with God's will, it's ongoing. The text points to examples like, Abraham and Jacob. Their initial desires often came from, well, pretty human motivations. But through their experiences with God, those desires were like molded and transformed.
So God didn't just give them a list of approved wishes, but He journeyed with them. He guided them and helped them shape their desires to match His plan.
Yes. And that same process can happen for us too. As we grow in our relationship with God, He can gently nudge our desires, refine those aspirations, and help us see the difference between those fleeting wishes and those hopeful desires that are truly aligned with His heart.
That reminds me of something I've been wrestling with. I've always wanted to write a children's book that I just keep putting it off. I tell myself it's because I'm too busy, but deep down, I think it's fear, fear of failing.
Yeah, fear can be a powerful thing.
But lately I've been praying about it, asking God for guidance. And well, something has shifted. I still feel that twinge of fear, but now it's coupled with a hope, like maybe, just maybe, this is part of God's plan.
That's beautiful. It sounds like you're moving from that idle wish to a hopeful desire. You're not just passively wishing anymore, you're taking action and seeking God's guidance along the way.
It's definitely a process, but I'm excited to see where it leads.
And that's what it's all about. Now, as we head into the final part of our deep dive, let's explore some practical tips for turning those idle wishes into hopeful desires, ones that are both God-honoring and life-changing.
We've really been exploring this idea of wishes, the difference between those that just kind of fizzle out and those that can actually lead to, well, to real change and a life that's aligned with God's plan.
And it's been amazing to see how, biblical stories and the power of prayer can help us shape those desires. But now I'm ready to get practical.
Me too. Our listeners are probably thinking, okay, all this deep stuff is great, but how do I actually put it into practice in my own life?
Exactly. And that's what we're going to focus on now. Those actionable steps you can take.
So give us the goods. How can we transform those idle wishes into hopeful desires that are, well, that honor God and actually make a difference?
Well, the first thing is to really, identify those wishes that are truly stirring in your heart. Like, take some time for reflection, maybe even write it down, figure out those desires that just, keep coming back.
So we're not talking about wanting a new pair of shoes or something. We're talking about those deeper longings, the things that, I don't know, speak to our soul.
Exactly. And once you've figured out those core desires, you got to evaluate them, look at them through the lens of God's word, his character.
So we're asking ourselves, does this wish align with what I know about God? His values, his principles.
Yeah. And don't be afraid to get real with yourself. Ask those tough questions like, is this wish, is it selfish? Or is it something that could potentially, I don't know, bring glory to God, serve others?
I love that. Like we're holding our wishes up to this divine mirror. Now, what happens after we've gone through this evaluation process?
Well, if you've figured out that a wish is, in line with God's will, it's time to move from just wanting it to actually going after it.
Here comes the action.
Right. You got to break down that big wish into smaller, doable goals. Come up with a plan and then start taking those steps, even if they seem small.
So instead of just wishing I was more organized, I might set a goal to declutter one drawer a day or something.
Perfect example. Remember, even the longest journey starts with just one step. And as you're taking those steps, make sure to invite God in.
Yes. Prayer is so important. It's not about asking God to, to wave a magic wand. It's about seeking his guidance, strength, that wisdom to deal with the ups and downs that come with pursuing any goal.
You got it. And don't underestimate the power of community. Surround yourself with people who will encourage you, keep you accountable.
Find your people, your tribe. Because let's be real, going after our dreams can be tough, and we need those cheerleaders. Anything else we should keep in mind?
Yeah, as you're moving forward, remember, it's not about being perfect. It's about making progress, persevering, and trusting God's timing.
It's about the journey, knowing God is with us every step of the way. This has been such an eye-opening deep dive into the world of wishes. Any final thoughts for our listeners?
As we wrap up, I want to leave everyone with, a question. If you could pick one wish to really go after, knowing that, with God's help, it could happen, what would it be?
Ooh, that's powerful. It's like we're being challenged to take everything we've learned and focus it on that one burning desire that could, I don't know, maybe change our lives, even make a difference in the world.
Exactly, because when our wishes line up with God's will, and when we pursue them with, faith and action, we become like instruments of his hope, love, that transformative power he has.
And that, my friends, is a wish worth having. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. May your hearts be full of those hopeful desires that lead you to a life of purpose, joy, and, well, abundant blessing.